Back for another podcast. You know the name by now with Don Anderson. Trips from hell. There must have been some either vacations or work-related trips. Everyone has some experiences traveling. Do you have any ones you can relate?
Well, there are a couple of episodes that I have categorized under the trips from hell. The first one has to do with a weekend trip that Pat, your mother, and I took to Toronto. I had gotten a station wagon, I think a big Pontiac station wagon back in those days, which had to be back in maybe in the 70s.
I remember that. It was a big Pontiac with the little fake wooden sides.
Right. Brown tan, yeah.
The seats in the back that folded up like way in the back so the kids could sit looking backwards.
Exactly.
We all remember. People from my generation remember those Pontiacs.
Yeah. Well, the story is we went to Toronto for a weekend. And we stayed at a fancy hotel on Yonge Street, and they had a valet service. So we unloaded our stuff, and they took the car wherever, and they parked it. And we went to a show on Saturday night. We ate at a great restaurant. We got up the next morning, and we had brunch. And then we decided, we did a little sightseeing. And then decided about 1 or 2 o'clock to start home. So I went down to we packed our stuff, went down to the lobby, and I gave my valet ticket to the guy there, and he left. Pretty soon he comes back, and he says, Mr. Anderson, your car's got a flat tire. It's up here 2 or 3 blocks, and we can't fix it, so you have to fix it. So I said to Pat, well, Christ, I don't know what to do. You wait here. I guess with all the luggage, I'll go up and fix the flat tire, put the spare on, and then I'll come back here and get you. So I did that. I mean, I wasn't particularly dressed up, but, I got all greasy and got up there, jacked the car up, put the tire on.
Are you pretty good with cars, or is that one of your strengths?
Not one of it, but, changing your tires, not exactly rocket science. It's just hard work. So I did it. I came back down. And I picked her up. And we started off, by that time it was maybe 4 o'clock. We started off for home from Toronto, down the Queen E Expressway.
Yeah.
And
QEW.
QEW. And we got maybe 10 or 15 miles outside of Toronto. All of a sudden the car overheated. And, the radiator was turning away, so I pulled off. And I stopped, and there was a fence, and then a gas station, an Esso gas station. So I waited there for a while, and pretty soon it calmed down. I couldn't decide whether to keep going. I said I can't get very far because I had lost a lot of fluid, so I climbed over the fence and went over to that gas station. And fortunately, the guy was there, the owner of it, and he said that drive it up to the next exit and then turn around and come back down here, and we'll figure out what's going on. So I did that, and fortunately, by the time I got back, there was overheating again, but, it wasn't too bad. So he said, well, I think your thermostat, there's something wrong with that. Either on too tight or too loose, but he adjusted it. And he said, okay, we'll drive up here, a place about 2 miles, and then turn right again and come back here. We'll test it and make sure it's okay. So I said, okay, so we take off. We get a mile up there, and lo and behold, the tire goes flat again. So here we are, out in the middle of nowhere, wherever the hell we were.
You're not that far from Rochester, though. You're only 3-4 hours away.
3-4 hours away, yeah.
So it's not like it's frustrating because you're not that far.
But the point is, I got one flat tire already in my car, and I got another one. So there's no way I can get that fixed. So we had to get out. We hitchhiked back to the station. The guy gave us a ride.
You and Mom hitchhiked?
No, the owner of the station, Nesso, his name was. By the way, it's called Nesso's Esso.
Nesso's Esso.
Nesso's Esso. So we go back. He gets his car. We go up. We take the tire off. We drive back. He patches it up. We put the tire back in. We take it up there. We fix the car. By the time we got back to the station, it was overheating again. By this time, it's 6 o'clock at night. So he said, well, I can't get this fixed. I have to get a new thermostat in the morning. It won't be here till about 10 o'clock. This is a Sunday. Mm-hmm. So he said, you're going to have to stay overnight. So we said, okay, we have no choice. So we said, the motel up here, we'll get you in the motel. In the meantime, you can come to my house for dinner. So we said, okay, now this guy, we found out at that point, he was an Egyptian. So he takes us to the motel. I mean, great hospitality. We check in, we leave our stuff. He takes us over to his house, or over to his apartment. Now, at that point, there were several high rises, like 10 stories high. He lives in an apartment there with his wife. He's Egyptian, she's Polish. And her kids were there. And her kids owned a pet cemetery. So there was a lot of conversation. I'll tell you, it went on. Very interesting people. And they treated us like royalty. We had this great dinner. I can't remember what we had. It was a little bit exotic, but not too bad.
This was maybe like in Hamilton or something, south of Toronto? Or
Not quite to Hamilton. Okay. Not quite to Hamilton.
Okay.
So the next morning, well, then the guy takes us back to our motel, drops us off. The next morning, that was before the day of cell phones, so we waited in the motel till like 11 o'clock in the morning. He comes there, picks us up and said, I got a new thermostat, I put it in, you're all set. So he takes us back, we get a car, I pay him whatever he charges, I can't remember, but obviously not enough for all he'd done. We take off for Rochester. We got about 40 miles, boom, the car overheats again. At this point, I was so frustrated. I said, find me a Pontiac dealer. I'm going to get rid of this hunk of junk and buy a new car.
What was Mom's reaction to all this?
Well, we were both frantic. I mean, here we go. We can't get more than 40 or 50 miles without the car overheating.
But she wasn't holding it against you. Everyone,
No.
Kind of making it was an adventure.
What the hell could we do?
Yeah.
So finally, we'd stop. We get the car filled up. And we go another 40 or 50 miles. We overheat, we stop, get it filled up. We finally got across the bridge at Lewiston. We finally got to Lockport.
Now that must have been, let me stop you for a second. Because last week, I got a check engine about 20 miles before the bridge. So you must, in your brain, you're like, I have a check engine, I'm going to overheat on the bridge. Do you recall that at all? Like, oh my God, I'm going to overheat.
I mean, we were just kind of inching along, but I do remember that after 2 or 3 episodes of overheating, we finally got to Lockport.
Okay.
Now you talk about incredible luck. We go to the Pontiac dealership in Lockport. That place is owned by a guy who lives in Pittsburgh. So we go in there and explain our problem. He says, leave the car. I'll drive you home. Put your suitcase in the back of my car. I'll drive you home. And tomorrow, I'll drive you back to Lockport. And we'll get your car fixed up. So that's what happened.
So wait, so just to be clear, so he was there in Lockport.
Yep.
You pull up in the lemon of the car. He says he'll drive you back to Pittsburgh because he lives there.
Exactly.
So you drive back with him.
Yep.
And the next morning, he will take you, I assume.
Yep.
Back to Lockport to figure it all out.
Exactly. So that's what happened. So we get back to Lockport, and they had a good mechanic there. And he said, I'll tell you what your problem is. He said that back there was a kind of a cowling around the radiator. And he said, you must have had an accident. Well, lo and behold, Pat had driven in the corner of a building in Fairport and had a kind of a fender bender. In repairing that, they'd taken out this kind of fiberglass cowling that went around the radiator. And as a result, the air was not being directed into the radiator, and therefore it was overheating.
Now, did she mention that during any of these repairs?
No.
Had you known about it?
No, we never even thought about that. But as it turned out, at the end, that's what finally fixed it. And so finally, and in the meantime, I neglected to mention this. You, that was before Chris, I'm pretty sure. I think the Hunters were babysitting you.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to be home on Sunday night, like at 6.
Yeah.
We had to keep calling. We're not going to make it at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. You had to stay over there another night, inconvenience them, until we could finally
Probably not so bad. I get to stay over the Hunters with a number of... I was young, but young, attractive daughters at the Hunters.
Exactly. So I think we finally got home maybe 3, 4, or 5 o'clock on Monday after a horrendous trip with a lot of aggravation.
But Tennessee Williams in what was it? A Streetcar Named Desire was always. I've depended upon the kindness of strangers.
Exactly, and
I
that's what
think
happened.
that trip, Nesso, the Egyptian, and the guy that owned the Pontiac dealership. I'm not sure that would happen these days. Maybe it would.
It might.
Maybe it would.
You're exactly right.
But
The kindness of strangers.
Yep, exactly. So I think there another short trip from hell here?
Well, that's another quick one. That at one point we had friends in Jamestown, Don and Pat Smith, and we had talked to them, and we said, let's go for a weekend skiing down in Olean. There were 2 or 3 pretty nice ski areas down Ellicottville, particularly. So,
around Ellicottville, there was Holiday Valley, and
yeah.
do you remember the other one?
Well, Holiday Valley was the private club, and Ellicottville was the adjoining.
Ellicottville was the town, right?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. It was not Ellicottville. It was. Shit, I can't think
Peak and
of it.
Peak, down by Peak and Peak.
No. I can't think of the name of the Hollymont. Hollymont was the name of the private club.
Okay, yes.
So, at any rate, we started on a Friday night, snowing pretty hard. And I had been to the liquor store and I bought, a bottle of gin, a bottle of vermouth, a bottle of scotch. And we drove to Batavia. And then, I can't remember the route number, they went south from Batavia to Olean. So we start out and the snow gets worse and worse and worse. And finally we're kind of busting through drifts, and it was unbelievable. We finally get to, I think it's called Silver Creek or something like that. We went in there to a restaurant and finally got a drink. We're still about 20 miles from Olean. And the bartender says, where are you guys from? He said, we just drove from Batavia. He said, that road's been closed for the last 2 hours. I said, nobody told us. Well, we made it. We made it.
Now, why, I don't mean to interrupt you, but going to Batavia and then south,
Right.
that sounds like an odd route. Back in the day,
Well, we
that
were
was-
on the thruway. We thought it was better to be on the thruway as long as we could, and then go south.
But you wouldn't go down to, I guess you wouldn't go to Jamestown then back. Then
No.
going backwards.
No,
And
that
this
would-
was before going down on 590 to
Right.
whatever.
Yeah,
right?
you're right.
We used to
exactly.
call it the back way.
Yes.
The back way, right?
Yeah. But anyhow, the rest of the story is that by the time we got to Olean, we were absolutely exhausted and frustrated. So the Smiths were there. They had been there for a couple of hours, and we said, let's have a party. So we got the stuff, the gin and the vermouth and the scotch out of the car. It was in a paper bag. And as I'm carrying it into the motel room, the bottom of the bag drops out, and all 3 bottles smash. On top of that, I was not feeling well. So I wake up the next morning, I got a full-blown case of the flu. I got a temperature like 103, and I can't ski. They went skiing, but I couldn't. I laid in bed all day, finally they collected me. I think Pat drove back. So from then on, we labeled that as the trip from hell to Olean.
All right, well, I think we'll wrap up the stories here on the trips from hell. I'm sure there'll be more in the future, but the wild and exotic adventures of a WASP. WASP stands for what?
White, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant.
And that's what you are.
That's sort of me,
essentially.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right, well, we'll have some more adventures in the future.